Before you start lesson 52, make sure you complete test K on powers and roots in your test master's booklet. Lesson 52 is on order of operations. Everything, every single thing that you're learning in this book either has an immediate application to your life, or it's something you will need to help you later in your high school mathematics. And right now we're on page 356 in the textbook. That means we've covered 355 pages of information. And that seems like a lot. And it would be impossible to remember every single little detail. But that is the goal. The more you remember, the more you try, the harder you try, the better you do. The better your attitude about learning, the better effort you put in every single day. It's going to make it that much easier when you get to high school. It's going to make it that much easier when you get to college. If that's where you want to go, that's what you want to do. And it'll be that much easier to get a job later because you'll be better than everybody else. I hope that you're doing this with a good attitude. You're making the most of this opportunity that you have to learn here and doing your best, because that's what God wants you to do, is make the most of everything, every chance that you have to learn. Make the most of every moment that you're alive. Now, when we talk about operations in math, we're talking about multiplication and division, subtraction and addition, those operations. And there's a certain order that you do these operations in, especially when you have a problem that has addition, division, multiplication, and subtraction all in it together. For right now, here's the steps that you should follow for the order of operations problems that you'll be seeing in the next few lessons. First, simplify powers and roots. So that means like 10 to the second power, 10 to the third, and roots, that means like square roots. Then you multiply and divide, and you do that in order, looking from left to right, reading the problem from left to right. And then step 3 is to do your addition and subtraction. And again, you do that in order, just reading from left to right. Now, for right now, you won't be doing any operations that have parentheses involved, but anytime you do, you should do those operations inside the parentheses. That should be part of step 1. Simplify within the parentheses, as well as simplifying powers of roots. That'll be part of step 1. Let's go ahead and do some problems. Look at practice problem A. I just want you to simplify that order of operations there. Not really an order of operations, but an expression. Simplify that. So let's look at step 1, simplify powers and roots. Do you see any powers or roots in that problem? You have that 2 squared. Let's just go ahead and cancel that out and make it a 4. We could rewrite the entire problem, but we just have one thing to change there, so let's just change that to a 4. And now let's go back through and do our multiplication and division. So what I like to do on problems like this is just rewrite them directly beneath the original problem. And that means when you're doing your homework, you need to put the original problem on your paper. And maybe that'll take an extra 10 seconds to do. So don't be lazy. Just put that down on your paper, and that will give you something to look at, something to reference to help you stay focused, stay organized on what your next step is. Our next step is to do our multiplication and division. So we don't do anything to the 40, leave our subtraction symbol, and we do our multiplication there, 15, leave the plus sign there, and then we do 8 divided by 4, which is 2. Now we go back through and do our addition and subtraction. Just work it left to right, and I usually work in pairs on these problems, so I'll say 40 minus 15 is 25, plus 2 equals 27. And there's the answer. One thing that's a little difficult about these problems is you can't check your work. I mean, you either did it right or you didn't. And the only way to really check your work is to repeat the problem over. Just go back through, look at it, make sure you did things right. And that's one reason it's very important, I think, to rewrite the problem like I did it there. One line after another, keeping things organized and in line. See how I have my subtraction symbols in the same spot, plus signs in the same spot, and that helps me stay organized in doing the problem. Even using a different color pen or pencil, you might want to do that like where I crossed out the 2 squared and changed it to a 4, so you can clearly see that you did something there and you need to be aware of what you did. Let's do another one. Look at this problem, just read it. See any powers or roots in that? That's our first step, is to simplify those, and I don't see any, so let's just go on to the second step, which is multiplication and division. So we would have 31 minus 8 minus 5 times 6. That would be 30 divided by 3. Remember, we do multiplication and division left to right. So we did that. 5 times 6 is 30 divided by 3. And so now we'll have to go back and do the division. 31 minus 8 minus 30 divided by 3, which would be 10. And now let's work in pairs on the subtraction. I'll move over to the right here. 31 minus 8, that would equal 23. Minus 10 gives you 13 for an answer. Let's do one more order of operations problem. Now here we have a distinct numerator and denominator. So on a problem like this is kind of a special case. What you should do is just work on the numerator separate from the denominator, and then once you have the numerator down to one value, then you can do division or reduction to simplify that fraction, whatever you need to do. So let's just go ahead and follow our steps, just looking at the numerator right now. And our first step is to simplify powers and roots. So we have a 4 squared, which would be 16, plus 2 cubed, which would be 8, minus 3 times 4. We can go ahead and do that. That's just going to be a 12. And that will give us 16 plus 8 is 24, minus 12 is equal to 12. Now let's go back and put the denominator in. 6. 12 divided by 6 would just simplify to 2. And so there's our answer. So just be careful on one like that. Don't get all confused as to what to do. Just work on the numerator. Do your order of operations as normal on the numerator, and then go ahead and simplify. Maybe you might have one where the numerator and denominator need simplification first before you do your reduction for that fraction. Basically, you just need to work on each one separately until you get them down to one numerical value in the numerator, 1 in the denominator. Now let's do some evaluation problems that we'll also need to work with our order of operation steps on them. Remember back in lesson 41 when we did some evaluate problems, and all you do is they'll give you some numbers to substitute in for the letters in that particular expression. And look at practice problem D. We have A times B plus B times C. So the first thing we want to do is substitute our numbers in for the letters. A is 2, B is 3, so we have 2 times 3, plus B times C, which would be 3 times 4. And we end up with 6 plus 12. Remember, we do our multiplication first, and that just gives us 18. Notice again, I wrote down the problem. That's what you should do when you're doing your homework and when you're doing this lesson too. Write down the problem and then put in the values underneath it. That gives you a pattern to follow, and it helps eliminate mistakes. These problems, you can't check your work on them. You can't just undo it like you do a multiplication problem, you do division to check your answer, or vice versa. These you have to entirely do the problem over if you want to verify that you did it correctly. So writing the expression down, writing down directly underneath it the numbers that you're substituting in for those particular letters, doing that in order, that helps you stay organized and helps eliminate errors. Look at E. Evaluate that expression if A is 4, B is 9, and C is 2. So you write down the expression AB minus A over C, and then you substitute the numbers in for the letters. A is 4, B is 9, minus A over C, which would be 4 over 2. We do our multiplication and division first, so we have 4 times 9 is 36. Minus 4 over 2 is 2. 36 minus 2 is 34. Let's do one more. This time we're going to be substituting in some fractions for our letters. And we have x minus xy when x is 1/3 and y is 1/5. So let's evaluate that expression. When x is 1/3, we'd have 1/3 minus 1/3 times 1/5. That's what y equals. Do our multiplication first. 1/3 minus 1 over 15. Now we have to have a common denominator here to add these. That means we need to take that 1/3 and multiply it by 5 over 5. And that would give us 5/15 minus 1/15. That would be 4 over 15. We can't reduce that anymore, so that's our answer. 4/15. So on that one we did our normal order of operations, but we also had to get those fractions to have common denominators before we could do our final step of subtraction. So whether you're working with just numbers or you have expressions like this where they give you particular numbers to substitute in for the letters, you do your order of operations the same. Multiplication and division first, addition and subtraction second. Okay, well that's all for lesson 52. If you need some extra help on these, there's some supplemental exercises in the back, and then of course you can always do the practice problems that are in the textbook, which are different than the ones that I just did.